Hey, welcome to episode 46, the week 13 recap for Flag for Discussion for Monday, November 24th. I am your one and only host today, Jace Hatfield. Unfortunately, Farbode is not going to be with me today. He's traveling back from a really fun weekend. And you're also going to have to bear not only with only hearing my voice, but with my voice itself. A very fun weekend with some friends in town, but at the cost of losing my voice, coming back from the Bears-Steelers game, even though I'm not a fan of either team, joining some friends. As always, go Lions. An ugly win versus the Giants, but hey, we got it done. This is not an NFL podcast, so enough of that. I'll start off, just one thing I want to mention. Not a crazy weekend of college football in terms of big upsets or any jarring results that are going to shake conferences up. I'll shout out Notre Dame, 70-7. If you were to just scroll through the slate, see what would happen, that's probably the biggest thing that would catch your eye. Anytime you beat a Power 4 team, 70-7, unbelievable game. I'll talk more about the Fighting Irish later, but I wanted to call it out at the start of the show. But let's jump into our one marquee matchup this week, the one ranked versus ranked game that I think people were really looking forward to, which was number 7 Oregon versus number 15 USC. In Eugene, the Ducks win 42-27. It was a game where they got the lead early in the first half and then kind of just maintained it throughout. USC kept fighting back, but was never able to get the stop on the Oregon offense. And then on the flip side, they just weren't able to get through the Oregon defense late in the game. I'll start with the USC side of things. Jaden Maiava was 25 of 43 for 306 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks, and took only 1 sack. But he was under pressure a lot. I think of those 18 incompletions he had and 2 interceptions, most of that was caused by him being under duress, throwing off his back foot. Over the course of the season, and Farbode and I talked about this on the preview show, he's averaged a little over 3 seconds in terms of time to throw, which has led the country and is quite a lot in the grand scheme of things. He only had 2.4 seconds in this game. Oregon, the official pressure numbers haven't come out, but I expect it to be in the teens. Bear Alexander looks like 4 or 5 himself, the former USC kid. I thought that Jaden Maiava played relatively well. I saw some discourse on social media after the game of people questioning his abilities, questioning his NFL draft stock, but I thought he played well. Again, the 2 interceptions, both of them were on downs where they had to make something happen, so it wasn't like it was a detrimental interception either way. And like I said, he was under pressure a lot, and they also had no run game, which I'll get into here. They were unable to create any sort of room on the ground, the offensive line. Oregon's D-line was eating them alive. They had 28 carries for only 47 yards. That's 1.7 yards per carry. And the longest rush by USC running back was 6 yards. They just didn't have anything on the ground. And I think once you get behind in a game where you're not running the ball well anyways, it gets really difficult to throw the football in the sense that the defense is going to send a pass rush every play because they know you're dropping back. And then the secondary can kind of start to play the pass and forget about the run. And once that started happening, I thought Jaden Maiava was put in a tough spot. He was able to lean on his 3 incredible wide receivers. Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane coming into this game had big names, and they lived up to it. Makai Lemon had 3 total touchdowns. He caught 2, and he threw for 1. It was a great trick play, an even better catch by Chinook Hines. Other than those touchdowns, I actually thought Oregon did a good job scheming him out of the game. He had 16 targets, only 7 receptions for 34 yards. But again, he's one of those guys that no matter how well you scheme for him, no matter which players you put on him, 3 touchdowns is still, that's a lot of damage from one guy, especially him throwing that touchdown. Just kind of shows his versatility in terms of his ability to execute trick plays and just his athleticism and his talent as a football player. But the 2 wide receivers that really dominated in this game, Jacoby Lane and Chinook Hines, it felt like they were given 10 50-50 balls, and I'm pretty confident they caught all 10 of them. They had 12 catches combined on 17 targets combined for 249 yards and a touchdown. And again, every single jump ball that was thrown to those 2 guys, they came down with it. It'll be interesting to see. It sounds like Makai Lemon is virtually a lock to go to the NFL draft. Something could happen that changes that, but he's going to be one of the first wide receivers off the board. He sounds like he'll be a first-round pick. He's a junior. Jacoby Lane is also a junior, so that's a name to look out for. He's been really coming on as towards the end of the season. He broke out last week, and then he had this big game against Oregon. That's an NFL name that I think a month ago his name was probably not in the conversation, and then now he's probably pushing himself first, early second round. Chinook Hines has some more years to go at USC, so that's a name I think we're going to hear for quite a while. Jaden Maiava, again, kind of an interesting scenario as a junior. His draft stock has been climbing. I'm interested to see as the week goes on what we hear about Is this something he's going to keep continuing at USC, or is he going to look to go to the NFL draft? We'll have to see. And that also depends on what Lincoln Riley does. Lastly, for USC, we'll talk about the defense. I thought their secondary actually played relatively well in this game. They hit hard. I'm telling you, Urlacher's son, I'm blanking on his first name, but he was a dog in this game. He hits hard. He also had the interception. Their secondary was making plays when they needed to. And unfortunately for the secondary, they were also the ones that were in charge of making tackles on Oregon's running back because their linebackers and their D-line were atrocious. They were getting eaten alive by an Oregon offensive line that had 3 starters out. They were playing, I think Oregon had to move around. They lost their center and a guard and a tackle in that game. So they were shuffling their O-line around. It didn't matter what O-line they put out, what combination of players and what positions. The linebackers and D-line for USC, they weren't generating any pressure in the passing game. They weren't getting any knockback in the ground game. And that was allowing Dante more time in the pocket. And it was also allowing Oregon to run for what felt like 5 yards every single carry. Again, and the USC secondary was the one that had to step up and make the plays in the run game. And then also, while Dante Moore's sitting there waiting for receivers to run open, they were in charge of the wide receivers. They did also get one big interception that actually came at a key moment in the game. It wasn't enough to get them back into it in terms of the score, but the score also doesn't reflect. This game felt a little bit closer and intense the whole time than the score dictated. It was a comfortable lead for Oregon throughout almost the entire game, but USC just with their ability to throw the ball downfield and catch 50-50 balls, it felt like it was they were just due for a comeback that never came. USC sits at 8-3. They have one remaining home game, or game in general. It's a home game against UCLA next Saturday night. I know that's going to sting. You lose this game against Oregon. This is a huge game, not in terms of just you making the playoffs if you're USC, but also your footing in the Big Ten, right? When they left to go to the Big Ten, there was a lot of rumors that they were hoping to try to get away from Oregon and some of these West Coast schools. They ended up joining Oregon and Washington with USC, and I know they weren't too happy about that. And also, they're going to look back and they're going to see that Illinois game. And I think this game is going to make this loss makes that Illinois game much worse, considering they probably could have been 10-2 with their only 2 losses being Oregon and Notre Dame. They lose at an Illinois team that started the year off with some high-ish hopes and a ranked number next to them, and they just haven't had the season they wanted to. And I know USC is going to want that game back. But a chance at 9-3, that's still a phenomenal season. That's a chance to play in a big bowl game. Probably not a playoff spot, but you're a good chance to look ranked. I think it's good momentum into next year. Obviously, what happens with USC moving forward is going to come down to the decisions of Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane, Jaden Maiava about going to the NFL or staying at USC. There's also been some word on the street about Lincoln Riley being a name for some of the head coaching jobs in the SEC. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him and then how obviously that impacts the decisions of Maiava, Lane, Lemon, and what's going to happen with USC. Because right now they have the number 1 recruiting class moving into next year. A lot of those recruits were guys that competed with Oregon and Oregon had at that game. So it'll be interesting to see the aftermath that comes with a game like that. But to talk about the Oregon Ducks, so Dante Moore, I thought he played a good game. 22 of 30, 257 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. And his interception was a 1st and 10, kind of unwarranted throw, not necessary, not a great throw. Good play by the DB as well. Other than that one interception, he played dang near flawless. He also had some throws in there that were very clear NFL caliber throws, tight windows. He had that streak over the middle to Kenyon Sadiq. He also had a nice out route to Jeremiah McClellan, about maybe a corner route, about 20 yards downfield, layered it in over 2 DBs underneath, but got it in there before the safety over top came down on him. He made some great throws in this game. He's one of those guys that seems like he's peaking at the right time. And mind you, he's been playing his best football the last 2 or 3 weeks, and he's been doing this, missing his wide receiver 1 and his wide receiver 2. He missed Kenyon Sadiq a few weeks ago, and he's been missing so many O-linemen over the last couple of weeks. Oregon's been playing true freshman linemen that haven't played all year. They've had to shuffle guys around. Normally, guys that play right tackle are playing interior. Guys playing in the interior having to go out to right tackle. His center was moved. They flipped their guards. He's been playing with a lot of combinations of O-linemen and wide receivers. He was asked about that post game, and he had some good commentary about next man up mentality at Oregon and the connections that he's built with not just the starters, but the guys that are going to have to play after that and what that's meant for him and the team. So I think he's been playing his best ball and he's peaking at the right time, which if you're an opposing team, potentially in the playoff, not a great thing to hear, especially as Oregon hopefully gets some wide receivers back, gets the O-line back, and gets healthy towards the end of the year. But I think the bigger story in this game was Oregon's dominant ground game. Despite having 3 starting O-linemen out, I thought they were able to generate a really good push up front. I thought that no matter who they had in the game, no matter how many freshmen or who was playing what position, they really weren't having any negative carry plays. And when you're getting ahead of the sticks on first and second down, it sets up an offense, especially like Oregon's, to have big plays on third down and also to be able to get a little bit deeper into the playbook and get creative going deep with screens, things like that. And Oregon was able to do that. They had 39 carries from the running backs for 182 yards and 3 touchdowns. And it felt like it was just one of those games where they were just bruising the USC defense. And as the game went on, each carry got a little bit easier. And it felt like they were using Noah Whittington all first half and Jordan Davison. And as soon as those guys look like they're finally getting tired and USC's kind of figuring them out, they bring in D.R. Hill, who then had an explosive third quarter to kind of help Oregon grow their lead. And then a name that I have to mention that I think is starting to garner not just a lot of buzz in the Big Ten, but in the country, especially for future NFL prospect drafting scenarios and purposes, is Kenyon Sadiq. He is an absolute beast. He looks the part when you see him, but he also is starting to turn into a really polished tight end. He had 6 receptions on 7 targets for 72 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had that beautiful touchdown, about a 25-yard touchdown over the middle, where he went up over 2 DBs, got hit as he caught it, came down with it. He's also good at in the screen game, catching screens, making guys miss. He had that beautiful hurdle that's going to be, I'm sure, on social media this week. And even beyond his receiving growth that he's had, he's been a dominant blocker throughout his whole career at Oregon. He's turning into one of the best players in the country and also somebody who is playing his best football. And I think he's fitting into the Oregon offense the best that he has since being in Eugene at the right time. This is a team that's starting to play their best football despite being banged up late in the year. And if you're an Oregon fan, you really just hope for continued growth and continued development of all these players, especially as you start to get healthy. And then the Oregon defense, I thought, played a great game. They had 1 sack, 2 interceptions. Again, I haven't seen any stats on the QB pressures, but it's going to be a lot. It's going to be high. And it was one of those things where they weren't really rushing more than 4 or 5 guys, especially later in the game when they knew it was going to be passing, because they were generating so much pressure between Mateo off the edge or Tatum Tuioti off the other side of him. Those 2 guys probably are going to account for 10 plus pressures, the 2 of them. Even up the middle, Bear Alexander being a D tackle, generated 4 QB pressures. That number's come out from PFF. And he's doing that as a D tackle. That's a lot for any singular defensive end, let alone a man on the interior. And I thought a lot of those pressures caused a lot of misfires from Jane Maiava, and also was I think the main reason behind those 2 picks. They also absolutely shut down the run game. They were getting the knockback on the line of scrimmage. They were getting to the running back in the backfield. They were shutting things down at the line of scrimmage, getting USC behind the sticks, forcing them to throw. And this was a game where I thought USC, given all of those negativities that they had for them going due to the Oregon defensive line feasting, I mean, they caught probably every 50-50 ball imaginable. And Oregon had 11 penalties for 130 yards, the majority of that being defensive pass interferences. There's a world where this game turns into a much more lopsided win for Oregon. I thought USC hung in there. But more importantly, what's next for Oregon? As I've said a couple times now, I think this is a team that's peaking at the right time. This is a team that is, they're doing a lot of the things that it might not be sexy on a box score, where they beat a top 10 team by 40. Granted, nobody really does that, but they're doing things that I think national championship teams over the last couple of years have had to do. They've had to go in and win games on the road where they're doing it on the ground. They've had to go and win games where they have to come back late in the game. They're winning games where they get a big lead and they have to sustain it. They're winning games where they're playing in cold, windy monsoons. They're playing games where it's nice and sunny and warm. They've had to rely on the defense for wins, rely on the offense for wins. They're also, with all the injuries they've had, they're getting a lot of depth pieces experience. They're also, I think, learning to win with different combinations and different people, not relying on one singular player to carry them to victory. These are all traits that, again, they don't show up on a box score. They don't necessarily show up when the committee's talking about where they rank teams. But when you go back and you look at the recent national champions, look at Ohio State last season, these are the kind of things that these teams have done. And this is not me projecting Oregon to win a national championship. This is me saying this is a scarier team than I think we're going to hear about over the next couple of weeks. And this is a team that's playing their best football. They're presumably going to be getting healthy over the next couple of weeks. And better or for worse, they're most likely not going to be playing in the Big Ten championship. If for them to get in the Big Ten championship, they'll need a Michigan win. And they'll also need to take care of business in Seattle against Washington. But if they don't play in that game, you almost can look at it too as a chance to get healthy. If this is a team that's 11-1, but Ohio State takes care of business, they won't play in the Big Ten championship. but that's a chance for them to get healthy. And I think right now, as banged up as they are, that's not the worst thing in the world to not play in that game. Take care of business. They're probably going to be a 5 to 7 seed in the playoff, which means they're going to host a playoff game, especially if you're in a 5 to 7 range, probably against a more favorable matchup. And then as long as you're not the 8 seed, you don't go play the 1 seed next. So they're in a good spot. Take care of business, get healthy. I think this is a much more dangerous team, though, than the national media and a lot of college football fans are talking about. I don't think this team's going to be an easy out. I think they've gone through a lot of hardship this year. They've had to win, as I said, in a multitude of ways. Those are characters that national championship and or really good teams carry with them when they go into the postseason. And this is a team kind of building that, not a resume the way we look at it when we talk about college football playoff, but when you look at a team that's going to be competitive in the postseason, that kind of resume they are building. Now, on a more dark note, unfortunately, I'm going to get into our picks recap from Farbo and I. Horrible week for Farbo and I, just to put it bluntly. Horrible week in the picks, and the shot in the bark, and in the F4D parlay. So let's just knock this thing out. In the F4D parlay, I'll start there. We went 1-4 on legs this week. We hit BYU -2.5 at Cincy. BYU's kind of in must-win mode, and they took care of business against Cincinnati. It was a close game, but it's a good Cincy team, and they got that win. And then the 3 misses were Nebraska +9.5 at Penn State. We were hoping that was going to be the Matt Rule audition in Happy Valley, a chance to kind of prove himself and prove Nebraska to be turning a leaf. They got destroyed. They looked terrible. I think that's going to raise a lot of questions about Matt Rule. They've kind of fallen off as the season's gone on, and they just looked uncompetitive. That also is interesting. Farbo and I have been saying it, and there's a few other talking heads in the college football space that have been saying it. Yes, Penn State had that rough stretch, but it's a much better team than that rough stretch says. We both still stand by when they lost that Oregon game, that broke their souls. That they came into the year with, they return all these starters, they pay all this money to get the best DC, they pay all this money to bring all these guys back and to get some key receivers in the portal. They go all in on the season. This is the season James Franklin's going to break the spell, and they're going to do it. And you get the home night game whiteout. You're number 3 in the country. All eyes on you. It's college game day. And you lose a heartbreaking game to a team that just beat you in the Big Ten championship a year before. And I think there was a true, serious, genuine, just soul-breaking experience that went on among that locker room and among that team. All of a sudden you have rumors about James Franklin's job, and the wheels fell off after that game. And they sustained some poor losses, but they've really grown back up. And I think that Indiana game, a lot of people wanted to try and say, well, Indiana, they must not be that good because Penn State stinks and they hung in there with them. No, I think they got the Penn State team that came to the season where it's chock full of 4 and 5 stars. It's chock full of guys going to be playing on Sundays in the NFL. That team has been there this whole year. They just kind of went through that spell, I think, with chemistry and their mentality and their just emotions and all of that. They're kind of on the rise, and I think they really proved that against Nebraska. We also missed on Kentucky +9.5 at Vandy. There was all this stuff with Diego Pavia was going out partying and going on podcasts talking about his Heisman campaign. I thought those were going to be distractions. They were not. He knew ball. I didn't. Vandy dominates Kentucky, looking good and trying to make a case for themselves in the college football playoff. And on our preview show for Rivalry Week, Farbo and I will definitely break down playoff scenarios a lot more and what we're looking for and what we think might entail. But I don't want to do that without him because that's a fun conversation. And then last leg that missed, we had Maryland +14.5 versus Michigan. They started off well, and then Michigan took over and dominated that game. I won't speak too much on it, but it looks like Bryce Underwood really started to find his rhythm in the passing game, and that's scary. That's a very scary thing if you're Ohio State, having to play them next week, and also just for his growth and development as a quarterback and as a football player for his future at Michigan. Because if Michigan gets him some more weapons, that's a guy, if he develops, that they could be very dangerous very quickly. All right, we'll go in reverse order to that. Let's do shot in the bark next. So I won't say too much more about it because we've already talked about both these games. Farbo was on Nebraska +9.5. Again, that did not hit. I was on USC +9.5 at Oregon. That did not hit either. So Farbo still sits at 11 points. His outright winners have been USF, SMU, and Kentucky. And then he has a Michigan State and a South Carolina teams that have both covered for him. I have 13 points, so I've got a 2-point lead. Stanford, SMU, and Cal have all been outright winners for myself. And then Toledo, UAB, UNC, and Northwestern have been covers for me. So we've got 1 week left in Shot in the Bark, 1 week left in the parlay, 1 week left in the pick'em. I sit 2 points on Farbode. Just a quick reminder of the point system. You get 1 point if a team covers, and then you get 2 additional points if they outright win. So 3 points. You can either get 3 points, 1 or 0. I have a 2-point lead. So if I have an outright winner, Farbode's done. If I get one team to cover, Farbode needs an outright winner to tie, and then we'll have to figure something out. And then if Farbode doesn't have an outright winner in any right, unfortunately for him, he will be the loser in this case. That sounds harsh to say. I don't know why, but I will come away with the win there. So he's going to need to pick an outright winner next week. So that'll be interesting to see who he comes up with to get the big win for him. And then lastly, in the picks recap is our actual picks recap. We picked 5 games this week. Coming into the week, Farbode had a 1-game lead on me throughout the entire year. And then we both go 1 for 4 on the week. So he's still got a 1-game lead. I'm now sitting at 45, 44, and 1. So just over 500, that Alabama push. It annoys me because of the 1, but now I'm thankful because it's keeping me over 500. And then Farbode is also, like I said, went 1 and 4. He is now at 46, 43, and 1. So 1-game lead over me. Unfortunately, I will be picking again, so I'm going to have to figure out a way to weasel my way into at least getting 1 different game from him, so that way I can try and at least tie, hopefully win. But this week, first game we picked was Kansas State at number 12, Utah. Utah, 17.5-point favorites. We thought the Utes playing for a playoff spot, style points matter. Kansas State didn't have Dylan Edwards, didn't have as much to play for, but Kansas State came out and fought hard. They were winning for most of that game. Utah did actually turn it around and ended up winning, I believe, 51-47. I didn't watch that game. I was tuned in to the Ducks and a couple other games, but for those of you who did, I would love to hear about it because it sounded like it was an electric game. But we were both on the Utes. They did not cover. That's where we both started off wrong. Then the second game we picked was Pitt at number 16, Georgia Tech, -2.5 for Georgia Tech. We were both on the Yellow Jackets. We thought, again, playoff spot on the line, ACC hopes on the line. We thought Brent Key. He's not coaching anymore. Haynes King, we thought he was going to be able to put the team on his back and get at least a 2.5-point win. They get smoked. They get blown out. Pitt comes away with a big win there. To murky the waters in the ACC, and I have a conference champ breakdown coming on this show, so I'll talk a little bit more about where all these teams stand, what are the likely scenarios, and what needs to happen for some of the more fun scenarios. Third game we picked was Tennessee at Florida. Tennessee -3.5. I was on Florida. Farbode was on Tennessee. I should have trusted my boy Will. I love that man. I should have joined him for Tennessee. They couldn't pull it out. Tennessee looked really good in that game. I thought Joey Aguilar looked good. The defense kind of looked a lot more like a Josh Heupel defense we've seen the last few years that we really haven't seen this year. Farbode was a believer in Tennessee. They get it done for him. A dominant win. And I think, and I'm putting myself in this bucket here, there was a lot of doubters about Tennessee and a lot of people saying, I don't think this team's all that. Get them out of my rankings. I thought this game, I know it's a Florida team, but Florida's been playing like some frisky ball recently where they've kind of hung in there with some good teams. Tennessee dominated that game, and they were kind of the first team to dominate Florida in a little bit. So I thought, you know what, let's keep them ranked. Good for them. They deserve to be ranked. I think they earned that number there. Again, I know it's a Florida win, but it's never easy to go win in Gainesville. A good win for the Volunteers. So Farbode, that was his 1 win on the week. I'm 0 for 3 at this point. Game number 4, Cal -3 at Stanford. This was Saturday night on the ACC network. I was on Stanford. They got it done for me. Farbode was on Cal. A pretty lopsided win that resulted in the Justin Wilcox being fired. As I'm recording this podcast right before I started, Wilcox has been fired. Not a whole lot to say about that situation. I think it was about time. They've really been struggling, and he hasn't turned the leaf that they had hoped he would for the last couple of years now. And Wilcox, too, I think with them joining the ACC, he's a West Coast guy. He played college football at Oregon. Most of his college coaching experience has been on the West Coast. It just didn't seem like a good fit for a team in the ACC. In terms of next steps for Wilcox, I assume he'll probably go back to being a DC at a bigger program like he's been in the past. He's a good defensive coordinator. He's coached good defenses. So if like a Washington or an Oregon or someone gets their DC poached, I could see him taking on that spot. As for what's next for Cal, I have no idea. I'm not even going to pretend like I know what Cal's going to do next. As I said, this firing just happened. But something I will research and Farbode and I will talk about, and hopefully on our next podcast have a little bit more insight there. So that was my 1 win of the week. We're both sitting at 1 and 3, Farbode and I. And then game number 5, a little bit of an emotional hedge for us. Number 15, USC goes to Eugene to take on number 7, Oregon, who was 9.5-point favorites. This was the Saturday 3:30 on CBS game. We were both on the Trojans. They don't cover. Ducks look good and roll in that game. So that's what led us to both be 1-4. Overall recap, I think the two big things to note next week, rivalry week, week 14, that's the final week of where we're going to be doing shot in the bark and picks. If we tie, we'll figure something out. But at the moment, Farbeau's got me by 1 game on the pick'em. We'll probably do 5 games then. And then in the shot in the bark, I have a 2-point lead on him. So he's going to need an outright winner to guarantee himself a chance to either win or tie. And then I'll have to adjust hopefully with an outright winner as well in that case. And then for the parlay, we've only hit 1 on the season, unfortunately. That 1 on the season, now in terms of the math, that'll break us even. I think we'll come out like 80 cents positive on that 1 hit, which is, I'm just calling it breaking even. So hopefully we can get a week 14 and the year on a high note, end it on a win. But we're hitting the point though where it might just be fade ourselves, create the parlay, fade it, and then because we've been ice cold these last 2 weeks. All right, that conference roundup I mentioned earlier, let's break into it. I'm going to start with the one team that's not in a conference. I'm going to start with Notre Dame. This is a team that I think a lot of people love to pull up their schedule and say, well, look at their wins. They haven't beaten a team with a little number next to it, so they shouldn't be in the playoff. I'm going to completely disagree with those people. This is a team that's not only playing their best football at the right time, I think they're playing some of, if not the best football at this point in time. They have their offensive line looks like it is one of the best in the country. Maiava is putting himself not only in just the best running back in the country, but potentially the best player in the country. I think we'll see him in New York for the Heisman. I wouldn't be surprised to see him lift that trophy up. I think it's Fernando Mendoza's to lose, but they play Purdue. Should be comfortable for Mendoza. Jeremiah Love is my Heisman in terms of best player in the country, leading his team to wins. Jadarian Price has also still been that guy as an RB2. And to put this in perspective, right? Like I said, it was Syracuse. I get it. They won 70-7. That's a Power 4 team. But to even put this a little bit further, the Notre Dame offense did not take a single snap until a score was 21-0. Pick 6, blocked punt for touchdown, pick 6. That was how that football game started. CJ Carr took his first snap when they were already up 21-0. They were up 42-0 at halftime. They probably could have scored 90 plus if they kept their starters in. And Syracuse, their 7 points, their 1 touchdown came with like 20 seconds left in the game as a total trash time kind of touchdown. This is a team playing, as like I said, their best football and some of the best football in the country. They're doing it at the right time. And they know that style points matter. That the wins and the way you win matters for a team like Notre Dame, a team that has an interesting loss with Miami, but they haven't looked great. They know that they're in the back end of the top 12, who's going to make the playoff. They know that style points matter, and man, did they put a statement on style points. I just think when you look at some of these other teams and how they're playing at the moment, and you look at Notre Dame, I just don't see a world how we leave Notre Dame out of the playoff. I think leaving Notre Dame out of the playoff, or people that say we should, are doing it more out of fear for having to play a Notre Dame team or watch them succeed than they are that they actually believe Notre Dame is not all that, because they look the part right now in terms of eye test and metrics and efficiencies. They're up there with anybody. All right, let's get into some actual conference here. So I'm going to start with the American. The American looks like they're going to be the group of 5 conference representative. James Madison has a chance to take over one of these teams, but I think they would need a little bit of craziness to happen for that to happen. The American is kind of down to 3 teams right now. It's North Texas, it's Navy, and it's Tulane. Now, interesting, North Texas beat Navy early in the year. So if you're Navy, you really do need a North Texas loss. But North Texas and Tulane both play home games against lesser conference opponents. I believe it's Temple for North Texas or for Tulane. And then North Texas, I will get that team here in a moment. But both of them are going to be heavy favorites in their final games of the year. And it's good. The way it works out for the American is, oddly enough, the highest ranked team in the American, if there is one, is going to get that spot in their conference championship, which is Tulane. They're one of the all 3 of these teams have 1 loss in their conference. Tulane is one of those. They haven't played either of them, and they're the highest ranked of these 3 teams. So Tulane's going to get that spot, and if they don't lose, they're going to get it for sure. And then if North Texas wins, as I mentioned, they beat Navy. So if North Texas wins, they get into it as well. And then kind of unfortunately for Navy, they also still have to play at Memphis, who's a good team. And then they play Army to end it. Army's not having their best year, but whenever you play a rival, you don't want to just discount those games. The American, though, it's going to look like it's North Texas Tulane, which would be a phenomenal game. Tulane is with Summerall is a team that we all kind of, I don't know if expected is the right word, but assumed, had the idea that they were going to be in this position. They were one of the favorites to win the group of 5 coming into the season. They're right in that spot here. North Texas has been a big surprise this year, though, but they've been phenomenal. That would be a really fun game, and very much so. It seems like if they both get to that spot, the winner of that game would be the group of 5 representative over James Madison and over the other one, obviously. All right, the ACC. All right, the ACC here. So this is also a 3-horse race that looks like it's going to be between Virginia, Pitt, and SMU. If all 3 of those teams win next week, it's going to get we'll get Virginia versus SMU. SMU is a team that I think they suffered some early season losses, and they didn't win a couple big games that they had early mid-season. So people kind of wrote them off this year. Well, Rhett Lashley's got this team really humming right now. They're playing their best football. They just dominated a good Louisville team who a lot of people at the midpoint in the season kind of thought was going to win the ACC. That's a team, SMU, not only do I not want to play if I'm Virginia or Pitt, but they're also a frisky team. If they win this conference, that's a team playing good football going into the college football playoff. Obviously matchup dependent. That's a team that could be a little bit better than I think they would be on paper, and a team you definitely don't want to overlook. And then Miami's kind of in a tough spot in this conference, right? Because they don't sit and own their destiny to win the ACC or even make the ACC championship game. They're going to need 2 of those teams above them to lose, and SMU had beat them. So even if SMU loses, it doesn't particularly matter. They would still have 2 losses, but they would have the tiebreaker over Miami. So they do play Pitt. So if they beat Pitt, they're going to need a Virginia loss as well to get in. That's their situation. I think more importantly for Miami, though, where they get ranked on Tuesday is going to be very telling of what the committee thinks their odds are of getting into the college football playoff as an at-large bid. As we know, they've been ranked behind Notre Dame, a team they beat earlier in the year, the last few weeks. And as Farbo and I have called out, that's a really tough thing to rank because you want head-to-head record to matter. You want those games to matter. They play week 1. They eke out a win over Notre Dame. Well, it looks like they kind of peaked early season. They've been kind of stalling out other than Malachi Toney, who looks like he's the best freshman wide receiver in the country. The other point, I just wanted to shout him out. But Notre Dame's playing their best football. So I actually think, yes, as of right now, Notre Dame is the better football team. And if they were to play today, I think Notre Dame would not only be Vegas favorites, but I would pick them to win that football game as well. So they're in a tough spot with that. And then they're also kind of among the one-loss BYU area. There's those like SEC teams like Texas. If they get a big win next week, what do they do with them? Miami's in a tough spot. So we'll have to see where they get ranked and then start doing the math on, okay, well, if an ACC team jumps them and a group of 5 jumps them, where does that not come back to? But Miami might need a little bit of help, and that help might start with Virginia losing to Virginia Tech, but we'll see if that happens. So recap on the ACC. If all 3 of Virginia, Pitt, and SMU, the one-loss ACC teams win, we're going to get Virginia, SMU. Safe to assume the winner of that game will make the college football playoff over James Madison. Not a guarantee, but a pretty safe bet there. Miami's going to need a little bit of help. All right, moving on to the Big 12. So the Big 12, I think, is relatively straightforward at the moment. It's going to be Texas Tech versus BYU, unless one of them loses, but both will be heavy favorites. BYU gets UCF at home, and then Texas Tech is going to get West Virginia on the road. Those odds already came out. Texas Tech is 21-point favorites. So unless BYU has 17.5-point favorites or Texas Tech has 21-point favorites lose that football game, they're going to play in the conference championship. Texas Tech, I think, is pretty safely in the college football playoff. I think they could sustain a loss to BYU if it was a close game and still get in. However, I feel confident that they would beat BYU again. They already played once and they already dominated them once. I think they're going to do it again. In which case, BYU is also an interesting scenario. They're number 11. And I don't think they did enough style points wise against Cincinnati to prove that they are much better than that and that they deserve more than that. They, like Miami, might need a little bit of help. If they want to get into the college football playoff, same thing as I mentioned with an ACC team jumping them because of an auto bid, a group of 5 team jumping them because of an auto bid, and the SEC with Texas could make things interesting. I think the Big Ten's kind of squared away, but if Michigan beats Ohio State, things also get interesting there. BYU, I think, obviously, if they beat Texas Tech, they're in. I don't know if they hang a close game with Texas Tech and they lose a close one, I still don't know if that's enough to get them in, but we'll have to see. That's a fun conversation. And when those rankings come out on Tuesday, just like Miami, that's going to be really indicative of what they need to happen and how the style points, how those matter or don't matter for their odds of getting into the college football playoff as an at-large bid. All right, 2 conferences left, arguably the 2 biggest ones and main ones. We'll start with the Big Ten here. Also straightforward. Indiana, unless they lose to Purdue, they're in. Let's chalk that up as a W. I think that's safe to say. So Indiana's going to be in the Big Ten championship, and then you have Ohio State is who they would be lined up to play now. Some interesting scenarios here that can happen. If Michigan beats Ohio State and Washington beats Oregon, that game's going to be played in Seattle. That's their big rivals there. Michigan would play Indiana in the Big Ten championship game. If Michigan beats Ohio State and Oregon beats Washington, then Oregon is going to be playing Indiana as a rematch from earlier this year in the Big Ten championship game. As of right now, Michigan is plus 10.5 at home. Looks like it's going to be a snowy 29-degree game. Plays perfectly into the hands of Michigan. And Ohio State also played without Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate last week. The line has started at 5.5 and is now up to 10.5. So I makes me assume that Vegas believes those 2 guys will be healthy, which is huge for that game. And then for the Oregon-Washington game, Oregon opens up as 7-point favorites on the road. That'll be Ohio State, Michigan's going to be the big noon kickoff on Fox, noon Eastern. And then the Oregon-Washington game is 3:30 on CBS. Again, that's going to be the CBS game. So we'll kind of know by the afternoon of that day who Indiana is going to be facing in the Big Ten championship game. I do expect it to be Indiana versus Ohio State, but there's a little bit of a scenario there with either Michigan or Oregon, depending on those results of those games, which I'm not discounting them. Those are both very much upset potential teams. We have the underdog at home in a rivalry game. You never want to discount those. All right, last conference to break down here. We have the SEC. This one's a little bit more complex here because I think mainly of who Texas A&M plays. So right now, we have Texas A&M at the top, 7-0 in the conference. And then you have 3 one-loss teams in the conference. You have Georgia at 7-1, Ole Miss at 6-1, and Alabama at 6-1. So Ole Miss, they're going to play at Mississippi State. This is going to be noon on ABC. And right now, Mississippi State is plus 7.5. So again, another rivalry game where you don't want to discount the underdog here at home in a big game, especially the Egg Bowl. I know that's a heated one. And then you're going to have Georgia. They're going to go play at Georgia Tech. So they are set at 7-1 in SEC play. But if you remember, they have the loss to Alabama this year. They have beaten Ole Miss. So they're going to lose out in the tiebreaker to Alabama. They have it over Ole Miss, which unlike the American, it's nice to have all these teams that have played each other. So you kind of know pretty straightforwardly what's going to happen. And then you have Alabama. They're going to get Auburn at Jordan Hare. Alabama's only 5.5-point favorites. Auburn played Deuce McKnight, true freshman QB, who looks really good against, granted, I believe it was Mercer, but still he looks good. And then you have Alabama, 2 losses at this point. So this is a must-win game for them for sure. And anything can happen at Jordan Hare. We've seen crazy plays last couple times they played there. It's been, you have the Jalen Milroe Hail Mary. Obviously, if you go way back a handful of years, you have the kick 6, the kick return. Chris Davis is going to win the football game. So interesting scenarios here. And then, to round it out, you have Texas A&M who's going to go play at Texas. That's going to be the 7:30 Eastern game on ABC. So Texas A&M is straightforward. If they win, they're in. Simple as that. They're undefeated in conference play, but they have not played Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama. So they don't own technically a tiebreaker on any of them. And then the SEC, if you haven't played head-to-head, it goes to your conference record, your conference opponent's combined record, which Texas A&M of these 4 teams has the worst of that. So if they lose, they would need Ole Miss and Alabama directly to lose that football game. So Texas A&M, win, you're in. Lose, you need a lot of help. Don't lose, but they play at Texas. So we'll see how that game goes. Alabama, also very straightforward. Because they own the tiebreaker over Georgia and their conference opponent combined record is better than Ole Miss's, Alabama wins, they're in. That's it. They don't need anything else. Alabama win, you're in. Alabama loses, they're almost entirely out of it because then Oklahoma has a tiebreaker on them, and they would need a ton to happen there. Alabama, win, you're in. Lose, you're out. Texas A&M, win, you're in. Lose, you need a lot of help. Georgia's path is Alabama loses, we're in. The Ole Miss path is Alabama loses and Texas A&M loses, and then Ole Miss would play Georgia in a rematch. Again, Georgia's path is pretty straightforward. Alabama loses, they're in. Alabama wins, they're out. And then Texas A&M's path is going to be they win, they're in. They lose, they would need both Ole Miss and Alabama to lose. And then Alabama's path is the easiest if they win there. So as you can see, a little bit more complex with the SEC, a little bit more tuning, if that's the right word, that goes on with like who's going to win and what. A little bit more tracking is going to come during rivalry week. We get to Friday. So Friday day, we get Ole Miss, Mississippi State. So we'll know immediately what's going on there. And then Friday night, we get Texas A&M, Texas. So going into Saturday, we'll have a very good picture of what the SEC championship is going to look like. But we do have to wait until 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ABC Saturday night for Alabama at Auburn to truly iron out what the SEC championship is going to look like. And then one quick note, if you're BYU and you're Miami, you do not want to see Texas beat Texas A&M. So Aggies fans, you're going to have some more fans, those being the Cougars and the Hurricanes rooting for you, because I think both those teams need the least amount of teams in the conversation as possible, especially SEC teams in that conversation. All right, with all of that breakdown done, I want to get into a little bit of a cleanup crew situation here. I know it's been a quick, short show, but that's probably the best for you, not having to hear me this whole time. Also the best for me, as you can tell, my voice is hurting. So let's clean this thing up, and then we'll get on our way. So cleanup crew number one, I briefly talked about it. Justin Wilcox, he is out at Cal. What's next for Wilcox, just to put a bow on it? I think he'll probably get a DC job at a good program, most likely on the West Coast. Try and rebuild his name, his brand, see if he can go back to head coaching. We'll see if that's in the cards for him. As for Cal, you got a true freshman, 5-star QB who's been great this year, JKS. Jaron, is he going to stay or is he gone? He's already he committed to Oregon, signed there. Then he transferred like a month later in the first transfer portal window in January back to Cal where he was committed previously. We'll see if he ends up staying there with the next head coach or if he's going to leave. And then, you have to ask the question, like, what's up with Cal in terms of they're in the ACC? That's an East Coast conference. They're the far West Coast team in it, them and Stanford. What's the pool? Do you go with a coach that's on the West Coast and try to bring the West Coast football and recruits into the ACC? Do you go with an East Coast coach and just say, hey, do your best to bring in ACC-style football and East Coast recruits into Cal? I have no idea what they're going to do. The firing just happened, but Farbo and I will make sure we do our due diligence and see what's next for the Cal program. Moving on to Mike Norvell. As of today, is official. He will be back at Florida State for the 2026 season. This is an interesting one, and I say that because Farbo and I have talked a little bit about apathy among fan bases and avoiding that as a program. Bringing Mike Norvell back it's a tough call because on one hand, as soon as that was announced, I have seen Florida State fans on message boards and social media come out and be very angry. They have come out and said that they want to cancel their season tickets. They've expressed how they're not going to watch and they're not going to care about this team and how I'm not giving any more NIL money. A lot of fans, the apathy feeling is seeming to very much has already taken place in the Florida State fans after announcing that he is back. And as far Bowden and I have said, that's something you really do want to avoid. However, given the number of high-profile jobs that are already available this year, LSU, Florida, potentially Ole Miss if Lane jumps. We'll see what other ones follow here. Penn State's open. I don't hate them hanging on to Mike Norvell. Right now, you're looking to be the 3rd to 10th, somewhere in that range, most attractive opening job. Do you really want to try to be 3 through 10, fire your coach now, and go into the offseason and compete with all these guys and maybe get your 5th option as a head coach? But if you wait one more year, because this is a huge cycle, obviously coaching cycles kind of ebb and flow. So in a year where you have a lot of coaches fired and a lot of openings, it's hard to be a top dog in those. But next year, a lot of those guys obviously are going to get more than a year chance. You could potentially be the job that opens up and is the top 1 or 2 jobs, in which case you can get your guy. And I think Mike Norvell, yes, he was awful last year, and FSU was awful last year. And yeah, they had a really down year this year. He still beat Alabama week 1 this year. And he still has that 2023 13-0 season under his belt. It's not like he's a bad coach. We've seen his ceiling. He can be a great coach. I don't hate giving him one more year while you're not the hot job. And if it doesn't work out, fire him and you are the hot job. If it does work out, then great. Like, you can hopefully stick with him moving forward. So I don't hate it, but the apathy is a scary thing, especially when you see that what the fans have already been saying. If you're Florida State, I think you just gotta kind of hope that that's something you're just going to deal with early in this, like right when you do it, and then hopefully fans kind of come around to it as time goes on. Moving on to our next topic. We talked about this a little bit already, but they looked really good in a win over Florida. I think that's going to kind of keep them in the rankings. Moving forward, sticking in the SEC, though, we have Oklahoma. Yes, it's a ranked win over Mizzou. Mizzou's going to back out of the rankings, and it was a pretty ugly win. It was a game. It was nice weather. It wasn't like it was a crazy rainstorm or anything like that. But Oklahoma it didn't look like they had anything going. And the story for Oklahoma this whole season, which continued again against Mizzou, they just can't run the football. And until you can truly run the football consistently, it's hard for me to take you as a genuine contender, a true threat. Even John Mateer, 14 of 30, under 50% completion percentage for 173 yards, and one of them was an 87-yard touchdown on a slant. So he took 2 sacks for a lot of loss, and he was their leading rusher yet again, 18 carries for 60 yards, 3 yards a carry. I think this Oklahoma team, they're fun because of John Mateer. They're fun because of Brent Venables' defense. But in the grand scheme of things, they're not a super threatening team. They played a Mizzou team who hasn't really beaten anybody this year and has struggled mightily against good teams. They've also been missing Bo Pribula, and he played, but he didn't look himself. The Oklahoma defense looked really good. I thought Mizzou had some chances to score, and they got soft by laying up for field goals and not getting aggressive in a game where what do you have to lose? It was an interesting look overall, but I think, yes, it's a win for Oklahoma, but I thought in terms of eye test and getting them in the playoff, even though it was a win, I don't think it did them well, especially watching Notre Dame win 70-7. So, but wanted to point it out, Oklahoma does get that ugly win. And then going back into the coaching talk here, Lane Kiffin, right? There was reports that came out on Friday that he might be signing with LSU. They offered him a crazy deal with like promised money for the roster every year. But then he reported that wasn't true, and now it's being reported that he's going to announce his decision after the Egg Bowl is played on Friday. I don't know if it'll be, they didn't say if that means it'll be right after the game or if it's going to be like a Saturday or Sunday thing. We hear about it. Either way, it sounds like we're going to have to wait till the Egg Bowl to hear about the Lane Kiffin saga. I have no freaking clue what he's doing at this point. He's gone like so many different directions. Left, right, up, center. I don't know what way he's going to go. It'll be interesting to see what comes out. But if that LSU offer is true and that's really what they offered him, I don't know how you say no to that, just given how much success you can have at LSU in Baton Rouge with that kind of money, with the recruits that they're able to get there. Well, we'll see. He's got a big decision. He's from Florida, so there's a lot of ties in there. And then you also, I thought on College Game Day, they made a great point, and they had talked to Dan Lanning, and he kind of brought this point up too of, sometimes the grass is damn green where you're at. And also sometimes it's nice to be the first Lane Kiffin at your school, the first big head coach, the first national champion winner, the first coach to bring consistent success. Sometimes it's nice to be that guy at a school versus just being the next guy. And so I think Lane Kiffin's probably going to have to determine, does he want to be the next LSU head coach or the next Florida head coach, or does he want to be the Ole Miss coach? So it's a tough decision for him. I mean, if I'm being honest, I think all of them are good decisions. I don't think he can go truly wrong with any of them, but we'll have to wait until after the Egg Bowl to find out what that means. All right, last couple here. Lincoln Riley, after the Oregon game, a reporter, he lost his temper at him. A reporter asked Lincoln Riley about the game day signs that had said, extend Lincoln Riley. It wasn't a great question, to be fair. The question was just, if you notice the College Game Day signs that had said, extend Lincoln Riley, they obviously mean that in a way that is demeaning to you. How do you feel about that? Lincoln Riley replies, that might be the dumbest question I've been asked as long as I've been a head coach. And I've been asked a lot of questions. You ought to be a little embarrassed to ask that question. This is a professional thing. You ought to try it out. Not a very nice response. I thought he kind of ducked the question as a whole. But I also say I do think it was a dumb question. Lincoln Riley is going to get a lot of flack for that response. And rightfully so. It was kind of a jerk response, but also bad question. I don't really understand what you want him to say to that. Like, good for them. There's not really an appropriate response, especially given that his name's been in contract talks for not only just whether he's going to stay at USC, but if he's going to go to one of these other big openings. Tough question for him to get asked in a tough moment after a loss like that too. But I do think, despite it being kind of a bad question or a trap question, you probably got to laugh it off, got to probably change the subject. I also think the lack of an answer and the avoidance of it as a whole makes me question him staying in LA at USC for the long term. But we'll have to see. An interesting video. If you get some time, I recommend checking it out. It's kind of funny. And then we're going to move on to coach again in that game, but different scenario. Dan Lanning takes a shot at the SEC and at the College Football Playoff Committee. I'll start with the SEC shot here. Dan Lanning says, yeah, we played a good team. We beat them, right? All we can do next week is try to do the same thing, right? This conference is a really good conference. It's competitive. We didn't play Chattanooga State today, right? Like, look at some of these other places. We competed. That being said, it's tough playing 9 conference games. It's tough playing in this league, and we got to take advantage of playing a good team today and attacking that. Couple shots in here. First one being the scheduling thing, calling out playing Chattanooga State today. And the other one, 9 conference games, taking a shot at them playing 8 conference games. That was a weaker shot in the sense that SEC is now going to 9 games in the future. So they've addressed that and they're moving on from it. But I think the Chattanooga State shot is an interesting one. And I'll start here. I've seen a lot of people already react to this. And a lot of people, when they react to it, they just immediately react by saying, everybody plays bad teams, or you played bad teams. Like, why can't we play bad teams? And I think they're missing the point. Whether they mean to or not, they're missing the point. The point wasn't you can't play a bad team on your schedule. That's not the point. The point is we as in Big Ten, everyone not SEC. We play our bad teams in weeks 1, 2, and 3. That's when we play our cupcakes, our FCS schools, the bad schools, our blowout games. That's when we play those. But if you look at the SEC, they play that in week 13. And I do think that there's a huge difference between playing a bad team in week 1 and in week 13, right? In week 13, it's a chance for a tune-up game. It's a chance for you to rest starters and get starters healthy. It's a chance to, as your players are banged up, worn out, and injured, to kind of get a free week to win despite having to deal with these injuries. It's also a really good opportunity to get your depth pieces experience, get young guys experience, get young guys who maybe they want to enter the portal, but now they get a chance to play and it kind of rejuvenates them. It's something that only the SEC gets to do that none of the country gets to do other than that. And I do think it's a fair call out. And if you're somebody that your immediate reaction is just, well, everybody plays a bad team, I think you're missing the point. The point is not you play a bad team. The point is you're playing a really bad team week 13, not week 1. And the advantages of doing that are, it's huge. Like, even in the SEC and in the Big Ten, honestly, in any of the Power 4 conferences, there's not a Power 4 conference team, again, especially in the Big Ten and SEC, where you can just comfortably play backups for 3 quarters and comfortably play true freshmen for the second half. And you can rest starters and not having to worry. Nobody is bad enough for you to actually do that and have it be like, oh, we're still going to win by 50. But when you play Chattanooga, when you play Mercer, when you play Eastern Illinois, you can do that comfortably. And the SEC gets a break in week 13 when the rest of the country does not. So I think it is a fair call out. I don't think Dan wasn't saying that you can't play bad teams. He obviously knows that everybody has to play bad teams. It's just how scheduling works. But I think he's calling for, hey, like, let's get those bad games early in the season, not week 13. And then the second call out he had, the second shot at the College Football Playoff Committee. And before I say it, I'll make a comment. This is interesting. Dan Lanning is really yet to speak much on other conferences or much on the College Football Playoff Committee. Throughout his career so far, he's been much more of a, like, I just want to win football games. Let me just play the next game and focus on that. This is the first time we really heard him have commentary about, like, the drama, so to speak, going on in the college football world. I wonder if it's probably a combination of these things, but I wonder if it's more he's just getting fed up and he's finally boiled over and he said it, or maybe he like feels like he's done enough to earn some respect as a talking head in college football and feels like, hey, I can probably stick up for the Big Ten when I say these things. Maybe he just really is really passionate about these things and feels like now's the time. Probably a combination of all those things, but this is interesting. It's kind of the first time we've really heard him speak to the drama going on. Sorry. All right. So the shot that he took at the College Football Playoff Committee comes here. He says, we just played a really good team. We beat them. A lot of times we play really good teams that become unranked all of a sudden, and that's not our fault. Maybe it is our fault. But all we're worried about is playing the teams we played, doing the job we need to do. We did that job today, and I think the proof is in the pudding. We played a good team and we beat them. Again, I think this is a shot at the College Football Playoff Committee and also maybe the talking heads in college football who take away from when Oregon beats a ranked team or takes away from some of their quote unquote big wins that they've had and diminish them immediately as a nothing burger. And I also think that comes into context with when you look at when an SEC team beats a subpar team by 3, it's called gritty and gutty. But when Oregon beats X ranked team by 3 or more, it's called they barely hung on and that kind of thing. So I think it's a shot at the playoff committee. It's probably a shot at the top, some of the talking heads and people in the college football space. It's interesting because like I'll start with the Penn State game. You see, if you listen to like JD Pickell, you listen to Josh Pate and other guys, Andy and Ari, Farbo and I have said this. Like we stand on that Penn State night game whiteout. Penn State was number 3, college game day. That was a big win. Like, yes, Penn State is not the team we thought they were, and they're in a totally different spot now than they were that night. But when you go back to that night, they didn't play Penn State. They didn't play today's version of Penn State. They didn't play yesterday's version of Penn State. They didn't play October version of Penn State. They played week 3 Penn State. That was number 3 in the country, and it was a night game whiteout. It was college game day. Everyone was watching that college football game. It's still one of the most watched games of this season. And whether you think Penn State is good now or not, you have to admit that that game was an impressive win given the pressure, the atmosphere, the situation. Everybody was calling it the biggest game of the year to that point. Despite what Penn State is now, that was still a big win. And I think he's trying to kind of point to that and say, look, that was a game a lot of people doubted and said, if we can go in and win this road game, that's huge. They did it. And then all of a sudden, those people are quiet. You look at the Iowa game. Oregon beats a ranked Iowa team on the road in Kinnick in a downpour game where last minute they find out they're going to be missing their 3 leading receivers, including Kenyon Sadiq and their right tackle, among a starting linebacker and more. That was a game where going into it, Iowa was ranked and everybody said they didn't think Oregon was tough enough. They were physical enough. They didn't have it in them to go win there. And they do. And then all of a sudden those people are quiet and it's just, oh, Iowa wasn't a good team. You look at USC, they were ranked coming into this game. They'll probably still be ranked coming out of it. People said Oregon's defense was fake and that they weren't actually a good pass defense and they wouldn't be able to hold up and keep up with the USC offense. And they did just that. We'll see. There hasn't really been too many narratives that have come out of it. It's a fresh game. We'll see where that comes. But I think that's the things that Dan Lanning is calling out and the things that he's speaking to. So it'll be interesting to see. He's caught a lot of flack for these comments from SEC fans mainly. It'll be interesting to see if this has any impact on where they rank in the next rankings, or if the committee responds to this, or maybe they just don't care and this is common. But it's interesting. You know, I also look at I think a team similar to Oregon in this narrative scenario is Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's a team that usually gets discredited when they destroy bad teams. They usually get discredited when they win close, and they really don't get credit when they dominate. They're in a similar scenario where I've seen when Notre Dame beat Syracuse 70-7. I think any rational fan should look at that and say, holy cow, they just dominated a Power 4 team. That is unbelievable to beat a team 70-7, really 70-0. That's domination. That's a top 5 football team in the country in terms of just pure how they're playing on that day. And then people are going to look at it and say, well, it was Syracuse, so does it matter? I promise you, if Alabama beat Arkansas 70-7, the narrative would not be, it was Arkansas, it doesn't matter. That would not be the narrative. So I think there are some teams that are unfortunately on the wrong side of this. There are teams on the right side. An interesting question here is, why is that? Why do some teams get the benefit of the doubt when they win a close game against a team they should have probably killed? Or they kill a bad team, but it's seen as domination, not as, oh, it's just a bad team. Why do some teams get that benefit of the doubt? And why do other teams, no matter what they do, it's never good enough? It's interesting. There's a lot of theories. I was talking to a friend this weekend, and they made a comment about, it was someone kind of detracting the Notre Dame game, and they made a comment. It's like, I think you want that team to be bad more than you actually think they're bad, so you don't have to see them in the playoff or don't have to see them succeed. That, I know that's a homer take, because I was talking about Oregon. I'm an Oregon fan. I don't think that's the full case. I'm sure for some people that's part of it, because that also only would work for people who are actual fans of the teams in the playoff. But it's interesting. It's interesting to see how people talk about wins that teams get retrospectively. For instance, Alabama losing to Florida State. We judge Florida State based on who they were on that day. And we kind of say, well, Florida State was good back then, so it's not a bad loss. So then why wasn't Penn State good back then? Why are all of a sudden, since they're bad now? It just feels like some people dynamically rank teams differently than others based to fit narratives. So Dan Lanning called it out. Should he have? Should he not? It's an interesting point. I'm curious to hear what you all have to say. But I'm going to end the show there. My throat is killing me. I need to get some water ASAP. Thank you for joining me on week 13. It's been a great time. Join us for Thursday when we drop our rivalry week preview. And as always, please hit us up on our socials. TikTok, we are at flagged4discussion. On Twitter, we are for discussion. And then YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast, we are flagged for discussion, spelled out perfectly. And thank you, as always, for listening. Thank you for bearing with me and my broken voice. I appreciate it. Enjoy your Thanksgiving week, everybody. I hope your travel goes safe. I hope you have a good time with family and friends, and get ready for some rivalry week football. This has been Flagged for Discussion.